What do you think of it so far? What do you think of C.S. Lewis's vision of hell?
Very imaginative.
Yeah, you know hell is for children.
No, it isn't.
Yes. Let me.
No.
Alexa,
No.
resume.
No. Alexa, stop.
Alexa, resume.
Oh my god.
Alexa, resume.
Alexa, stop. Stop. Alexa.
No, no, Alexa, resume. Alexa, resume.
Alexa, stop. Ugh.
All right.
We just fought a war without even using
I think
guns.
I think you're really gonna like this chapter. Chapter 2. I was not left very long at the mercy of the tussle-headed poet because another passenger interrupted our conversation. But before that happened, I had learned a good deal about him. He appeared to be a singularly ill-used man. His parents had never appreciated, listen to this story. His parents had never appreciated him, and none of the 5 schools at which he had been educated seemed to have made any provision for a talent and temperament such as his.
Me.
To make matters worse,
Just like every.
he had been.
So picture that and math. Okay? Like, think of all these math, and there's me and my temper with math, and like. Okay, we're getting too involved with
To
me.
make matters worse, I think his problem is that he blames other people other than himself for not being good at stuff. To make matters worse, he had been exactly the sort of boy in whose case the examination system works out with the maximum unfairness and absurdity. In other words, tests are unfair for him.
Aww.
It was not until he reached the university that he began to recognize that all of these injustices did not come by chance, but were the inevitable results of our economic system.
Weird. Oh no.
So capitalism did not merely enslave the workers, it also vitiated taste and vulgarized intellect. Hence our educational system, and hence the lack of, quote, recognition for new genius. So his particular genius was never recognized.
Aww.
The discovery had made him a communist. You remember what a communist is?
By the way, there was an orange on your
I know, I saw that.
elbow. I threw that all the way over here.
Do you remember about communists?
That's politics, and I don't want to get
No,
into
it's
it.
just like Russia, the USSR.
Oh, okay.
Remember, back before Putin. But
We don't talk about
he's
politics.
not monitoring your podcast. Trust me on that. But when the war came,
We still don't talk about politics.
But here, look,
This is a
listen to this
politics-free.
next sentence. But when the war came along and he saw Russia in alliance with the capitalist governments, he had found himself once more isolated and had to become a conscientious objector. A conscientious objector is someone who says that they refuse to fight.
You gotta fight.
No,
for your
they
right
refuse to fight.
party.
The indignities he suffered at this stage of his career had, he confessed, embittered him. He decided he could serve the cause best by going to America. But then America came into the war too.
Dang it, America.
Yeah. It was at this point that he suddenly saw Sweden as the home of a really new and radical art, but the various oppressors had given him no facilities for going to Sweden, so he didn't have the money. There were many troubles. His father, who would see, he's putting the best face on it, but you can kind of see through that all these problems are not necessarily someone else's, they're his own. His father, who had never progressed beyond the most atrocious mental complacency and smugness of the Victorian epoch, that means he was kind of stuffy. and was giving him a ludicrously inadequate allowance. So he was still getting allowance, and he had been very badly treated by a girl too. He,
Well, that's
he had thought her he had thought her a really civilized and adult personality, and then she had unexpectedly revealed that she was a mass of bourgeois prejudices. Bourgeois means like
fancy
common people, no, like the common workers and all the bourgeois prejudices. So the prejudices not unlike the prejudices in our country against immigrants and so on. That was an issue even back then. And monogamic instincts. Monogamic means to settle down with one person.
ah.
So he didn't want to settle down.
He was
Non-committal. Well,
he's non-committal.
polygamous is having multiple relationships.
So he's a polygamous?
Well, it's anyway. Let's keep reading. He might not have been able to get another girl if you think about it.
Oh.
Jealousy, possessiveness, was a quality he particularly disliked. She had even shown herself at the end to be mean about money. That was the last straw. He had jumped under a train. I gave a start, but he took no notice. Since he's dead, that's how he died. Yeah, he had jumped under a train. Even then, he continued. Ill luck had continued to dog him.
So, did he kiss a train? Or did he
jumped under a train. That was a common way for people to commit suicide back then.
He fell off a bridge onto a train.
No, he probably jumped onto the railroad tracks as a train was coming. Yeah. That was more common than someone jumping off a bridge, because bridges, I guess, maybe weren't as tall, or I don't know. It was easy. There were train tracks everywhere, so it was easy.
And also, they had water probably at the bridge.
Well, but the water will make you drown, because most people, don't swim or can't swim when they jump off a tall bridge. That's what the little known fact. It's not the fact that they drown; it's that they hit the water so hard it knocks them unconscious. Or
water is not very good at 1 foot or something like that, because it's hard as concrete.
Yes, from a height. If you're jumping from a really high, tall point, it can be very hard. Even then, he continued, ill luck had continued to dog him. He'd been sent to the gray town, but of course, it was a mistake. I could find, he assured me, that all the other passengers would be with me on the return journey, but he would not. He was going to stay there. He felt quite certain that he was going where, at last, his finely critical spirit would no longer be outraged by an uncongenial environment. In other words, not a uncongenial means not polite or whatever, not welcoming. Where he would find recognition, in quotes, and appreciation, in quotes. Meanwhile, since I hadn't gotten my glasses, he would read me the passage about which Cyril Blulow had been so insensitive. It was just then that we were in. What?
I would think that the poet would go to heaven.
I don't know this guy, because it isn't necessarily. Well, we haven't heard his poetry, so we don't know if his poetry's any good. But on the other hand, you see, he described his life of basically he was never accepted responsibility for himself and was always blaming other people and borrowing money and so on. So he didn't really, even though maybe he was a poet, if you think about it, his main concern with the poetry is just to get other people's attention or criticism, right, as opposed to trying to change the world or whatever.
That's a lot of people's eye.
Yeah, a lot of people on YouTube channels are that way.
No, don't hit.
It was just then that we were.
Don't hit the YouTube people, okay?
You know what I mean.
I know.
It was just then.
I know you're targeting some people.
It was just then.
Know who you are.
You know who you are. He felt quite certain that he was going where, at last, his finely critical spirit would no longer be outraged by an uncongenial environment. In other words, unappreciated. Where he would find, quote, recognition and, quote,
Likes.
appreciation.
Oh no, so he's just basically getting recognition and trying to
Right.
be recognized and
So-
trying to be loved and trying to be someone he's probably not.
And do you see any kind of analogy between that and likes on YouTube and Facebook?
Instagram.
Instagram, that's right.
Instagram is a huge load of stuff where everything is kind of fake, but there are some good places on it.
Meanwhile, but not this YouTube channel.
No, this is
Yeah, this is the real deal.
a
This is
family
legit.
friendly alternative content.
Well, it can be family friendly and also viral.
I mean,
Yeah,
sense
so-
of like the adpocalypse, man. Everything has to be family friendly now.
Meanwhile, yeah, that's true. Because your rep stays with you in
Yeah.
cyberspace.
I need to technically just. No, Dad. No, I need to teach you. Okay, we're gonna have a talk after this.
All right, over how
Yeah.
how out of touch I am.
What the demonetize button means and the evil yellow dollar sign.
Meanwhile, since I hadn't gotten my glasses, he would read
Oh, I thought you were talking about your
the passage about which Cyril Blello had been so insensitive. It was just then.
Yeah, we get it. You're a crybaby. Now go away.
It was just then that we were interrupted. One of the quarrels, which were perpetually simmering in the bus, had boiled over, and for a moment there was a stampede. Knives were drawn,
Oh no.
pistols were fired,
Oh no.
but it all seemed strangely innocuous, which means unimportant. And when it was over, I found myself unharmed, though in a different seat with a new companion. He was an intelligent-looking man with a rather bulbous nose, a big nose,
Like
and
Squidward.
and a bowler hat.
I could see his nose as Squidward.
I looked out the windows. We were now so high that all below us had become featureless, but fields, rivers, or mountains I did not see, and I got the impression that the gray town still filled the whole field of vision. It seems the deuce of a town, I volunteered, and that's what I can't understand. The parts of it that I saw were so empty. Was there once a much larger population? I asked.
Maybe, who knows? It's death. Welcome to it.
Pages stuck together. No, you're going to find out what happened. Not at all. I'll do this. This guy must be British. Not at all, said my neighbor. The trouble is that they're so quarrelsome. As soon as anyone arrives, he settles in on some street. And before he's been 24 hours, he quarrels with his neighbor. Before the week is over, he's quarreled so badly that he decides to move. Very likely he finds the next street empty because all the people there have quarreled with their neighbors and moved. If he so settles in, if by any chance the street is full, he goes further. But even if he stays, it makes no odds. He'll sure to have another quarrel pretty soon, and then he'll move on again. Finally,
I
he'll...
don't know how they'd have enough money.
Well, he's about to explain that too. Finally, he'll move right out to the edge of town and build a new house. You see, it's easy there. You've only got to think a house, and there it is. That's how the town keeps on growing. Leaving more and more empty streets? I asked. That's right. And time's sort of odd here. That place where we caught the bus is thousands of miles from the civic center where all the newcomers arrive from Earth. All the people you've met were living near the bus stop, but they've taken centuries of our time to get there by gradual removals. And what about the early arrivals? I mean, there must people.
Like aliens?
There must be
Conspiracy
people
theory!
who came from Earth to your town even longer ago.
Conspiracy
That's
theory.
right, there are. They've been moving on and on, getting further apart. They're so far apart by now that they never could think of coming to the bus stop at all. And
Huh.
this is the part that makes me think of that Frost poem, The Road Not Taken.
Did you plan this?
I mentioned it earlier before we did the cut. That it reminded me of this.
Oh, by the way, this is one day in the future.
It reminded me of the Frost poem, "The Road Not Taken," because remember, and he's deciding which one is one looks a little more traveled, and but they both are basically the same choice, and so.
It's like, okay,
Well, wait a minute, let me finish, and then you'll have the whole picture. And remember, he says that he took the one of the turns, and he said that he thought in the future would he ever come back and take that other turn.
Like a fork in the road.
And it's a fork in the road. And what he said, which is true, he says, but wait.
Can we read this?
He said, wait. Huh? We read, The Road Not Taken by Frost.
Yeah.
It's been a while. And he said, and what he says is, he says way, and a way is another word for a road.
By the way, out of context, but me and my sister Taylor, shout out to her. She's amazing.
Shout out Taylor.
We both thought that you have a really boring voice.
All right, well, I'll try and
no,
put some
I'm
more
sorry.
energy into it. All right, let's go back to the Frost
Okay.
poem, because people are going to lose, people have short attention spans.
That's rude.
And
that's rude.
what he says, way leads on to way. In other words, you'll take another fork and another fork.
Like this. Okay.
And he says that I doubt I'll ever come back to this point.
Can I
Yes.
okay.
Now what are your thoughts?
So I was thinking about, like, there's two roads, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's two roads. One's left and one's right.
Right.
And they both lead to death.
Okay.
And there might be 5 people going on the right side and only 2 people going on the left side.
Mm-hmm.
Now, majority usually goes the safer side with the right because there's more people.
Oh, just people are accustomed to going right.
No, going in packs.
Oh, okay.
And also, if they're all gone and another person comes up and they see there's more footprints or there's more sense of human contact there, they'll most likely go there instead of over to the left side. That will still go the same way to death.
Yeah.
But it's
the road less or more
less
the road more
taken.
No, it's the road more traveled because it's got more footprints and more people.
Yeah, so the majority would probably.
Yeah, so you're right. Most people would think that's the easy way. I don't want to blaze my own trail.
So yeah.
Let's see.
That was just me talking.
So they're getting farther apart. They're so far off by now that they could never think of coming to the bus stop at all.
Like literally at all.
At
like,
all.
Not even
not even
taking the train. Not even taking the train or the plane. Not even taking the bus either. Like, if you're going onto a bus, you've got.
But if you think about it, whether to get on the bus or stay where you are, that's one of those terms.
Okay.
That's one of those same terms that Frost talked about. There's a bit of astronomical distances.
I feel like my comedy has gone down since Hamilton. What was it?
Hamlet?
Hamlet.
Yeah.
Why am I thinking of Hamilton?
There wasn't that much comedy in Hamlet.
Kind of. Because I used to crack jokes and Stop nudging
All right,
me.
that means
That
we need
means
to move
shut up.
on. We're 5 minutes in of
You know what?
half of a
This
clip
is
already.
it's a short book.
All right.
Let's make it longer.
Yeah, we are. All right, listen, this is interesting.
So interesting.
Astronomical
Keep your eyes.
distances. There's a bit of rising ground near where I live, and a chap has a telescope.
A chap.
A chap, yes, that is a British fellow.
Also.
You can see the lights of the inhabited homes.
Okay. I was going to talk about my phenomenon.
Where those old ones live.
Old ones.
Millions of miles away.
Like him. With his fancy...
Millions
with his
of miles.
glasses.
I can't read without it.
I'm sorry. We have to show them
Millions
your
of miles
glasses.
from us and from another. Every now and then.
So the chap's over here, right? The chapstick is right here.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what were they? The olds are over there. The oldies are over there. So you're right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
No, he's talking about he lives near the bus stop and that he knows a chap who's on a high point with a telescope. So he says, you can see the lights of the inhabited houses where those old ones live millions of miles away, millions of miles from us and from one another. So not only are they far away, but they're far apart. Yeah, because they're if you think about it, well, if you think about it, they're creating. They're described as stars, so they're like their own little. And stars have planets around them, right? And so they're like own little universe that they're so sucked up into themselves, right?
They're all about them.
Yes, they've completely lost sight of the rest of the world. It's another way to look at it.
Wow, good job with anomalies.
Not anomalies. An anomaly is when something breaks. Like we have an anomaly in the control panel.
Well, I just made a terrible anomaly.
Yes, that was...
terribly break.
Analogy.
A terrible break.
All right, let's continue on. Every now and then they will move further.
So,
still, that's one of the disappointments.
So take these two oranges.
Yeah.
So they're like here, and then they're here, and then there, and then...
Infinitely far apart.
They just keep going.
That's one of the disappointments. I thought you'd meet interesting historical characters, but you don't. They're too far away. Well,
I'd hate that.
Would they get to the bus stop in time if they ever set out? Well, theoretically, but it'd be a distance of light years, and they wouldn't want to by now. Not those old chaps like Tamburlaine and Genghis Khan or Julius Caesar or Henry V. Wouldn't want to. That's right. The nearest of these old ones is Napoleon. We know that because two chaps, there's a lot of chaps in this one, made the journey to see him.
There's so many chapsticks, man.
They started long before I came,
chapsticks.
Of course.
I'm sorry to everyone who's a chap.
They started long before I came, of course, but I was there when they came back. Almost 15,000 years of our time it took them. We've picked out the house by now. Just a little pinprick of light and nothing else for millions of miles.
Huh. So basically...
But they got there. That's right. He built himself, meaning Napoleon, built himself. You remember who Napoleon was? The French general.
He did this.
And he was exiled at...
He did this a lot, did he?
What island was he exiled? He was...
Because he froze? He got cabin fever?
He was exiled.
He was exiled.
What island?
Napoleon.
Elba.
Elba.
Elba is a little island off the south of France.
I was not rehearsed for this, so don't even...
I actually told you.
Yesterday when I fell asleep.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. All right.
So don't even. But now I'm awake.
All right. He built himself a large house, all in the Empire style. Rows of windows, flaming with light.
Rows of windows.
Though it only shows up
Hello,
as a pinprick from
windows.
where I live.
Nice to meet you.
Did they see Napoleon?
Did they see Napoleon?
That's right. They went right up and looked. They went right up and looked through one of the windows. Napoleon was there all right. What was he doing? walking up and down all the time, left, right, never stopping for a moment. The two chaps watched him for about a year, and he never rested, and muttering to himself all the time, "It was Salt's fault. It was Nay's fault. It was Josephine's fault.
Oh
It
no,
was the
not
fault."
Josephine!
That was his wife. It was the fault of the Russians. It was the fault of the English.
Oh no, not
And
the
like
English!
that, well, and they were the ones who defeated him at Waterloo.
Oh.
Like that all the time, never stopped for a moment. A little fat man, and he looked kind of tired, but he didn't seem able to stop.
Oh no, not the little
And
fat man!
From the vibrations I gathered that the bus was still moving, but there was now nothing to be seen from the windows, which confirmed this. Nothing but gray void above and below. Then the town will go on spreading indefinitely, I said.
Indefinitely.
That's right, said the intelligent man, unless someone can do something about it. How do you mean? Well, as a matter of fact,
Build a garden wall.
so he's got a plan, listen, to make hell a better place. Well, as a matter of fact, between you and me and the wall, that's my job at the moment. What's the trouble about this place? Not that people are quarrelsome. That's only human nature, and was always the same even on Earth. The trouble is they have no needs. You get everything you want.
You're right there.
Okay, just
Fine.
checking. I don't know. I was worried that all of this didn't get recorded.
That was the awkwardest
You get everything
laugh
you
ever.
want. I'll cut it out, okay? You get everything you want.
No, we can't cut that
Not
out.
very good
We
quality,
cannot
of
cut
course.
That weird.
All right,
that was
listen.
weird.
You get everything you want, not good quality, of course, just by imagining it. That's why it never costs any trouble to move to another street or build another house.
Makes sense.
In other words, there's no proper economic basis for any community life. If they need real shops, chaps would have to stay near the real shop where real shops were. If they needed real houses, they'd have to stay near where builders were. It's a scarcity that enables a society to exist. Well, that's where I come in. I'm not going on this trip for my health. As far as that goes, I don't think it would suit me up there. But I can come back with if I can come back with some real commodities. You know what those are? Like things you buy at Walmart.
Oh.
Yeah.
What about Target?
Target, Belks.
I got some beautiful.
But even
shirts in my house.
our favorite grocery store, Bilo or Kroger.
Oh yeah, Kroger has the best.
They sell commodities too. Food Line, or not Food Line. Dollar General.
Man,
commodities.
I forgot my ice cream.
Technically, those oranges are commodities.
No, they're not. They're oranges.
No.
They're oranges.
A commodity is anything that can be sold and mass produced, or you see what I'm saying? And
Like cats.
And there's a cost that's
What,
associated
cats?
for a quantity of them.
What about cats?
No, a cat is not a commodity.
What about dogs?
No, they are to a pet store, I suppose, but no, they're not what you would consider a commodity.
Hamsters.
Commodity is something that usually
Nice.
comes in a box or a basket or goes in a
Babies.
grocery bag.
Babies. Babies can come in a box.
Look, he goes on to say some real commodities, anything at all that you could really bite or drink or sit on.
You can babysit a cat.
All right, so that's
or
what his commodity. He wants
kid.
something that they can bite, like some food or drink or sit on. At once, you'd get a demand down in our town.
Like a bed.
I'd start a little business. I'd have something to sell. You'd soon get people coming to live near. Centralization. 2 fully inhabited streets would accommodate the people that are now spread over 1 million square miles of empty streets. I'd make a nice little profit and be a public benefactor as well.
I like his idea.
To improve hell. Make hell more livable.
But
You mean-
but
You mean if they had to live together, they'd gradually learn to quarrel less, I asked. Well, I don't know about that.
Okay, I have a problem.
We're
If he's
not
gonna-
going to get through this.
No, this is serious. If
Right.
they're gonna build a store,
Yeah.
like one store, everyone's gonna have to be buying there, you know?
Yeah,
And-
that's what his point, right? He'll corner the market.
No, but
Right.
it's gonna get quarrelsome because if they run out of something,
But he's
they're gonna fight over what, and it's just gonna be,
Right,
and
well-
everyone's like gonna try to grab something
well, let's
where
see what
somebody
he
is gonna
says.
be like, oh no.
This is what the man says. He says, well, I don't know about that, whether they'll quarrel less. I dare say they could be kept a bit quieter. You'd have a chance to build up a police force, knock some kind of discipline in them. Anyway, and here he dropped his voice, it'd be better, you know. Everyone admits that. Safety in numbers. Safety from what? I began. But my companion nudged me to be silent, and I changed my question. But look here, I said. If they can get everything just by imagining it, why should they want any real things, as you call them? Eh? Oh, well, they'd like houses that really kept out the rain. Their present homes don't? Well, of course not. How could they? What the devil is the use of a building, then? The intelligent man put his head closer to mine. Safety again, he muttered. At least the feeling of safety. It's all right now, but later on, you understand. What? I said, almost involuntarily sinking my own voice to a whisper. He articulated noiselessly, as I expected, that I understood lip reading.
Okay.
I put my ear up close to his mouth. Speak up, I said. It will be dark presently, he mouthed. You mean the evening is really going to turn into night in the end? He nodded. What's that got to do with it? Said I. Well, no one wants to be out of doors when that happens. Why? His reply was so furtive that I had to ask him several times to repeat it.
Why?
And when he had done so, being a little annoyed, as one is so often with whispers, I replied without remembering to lower my voice. Who are they? I asked. And what are you afraid that they'll do to you? And why should they come out when it's dark? And what protection could an imaginary house give if there was any danger? Here, shouted the big man. Who's talking about that stuff? You stop your whispering, you two. If you don't want a hiding, see, like beating their hides, spreading rumors, that's what I call it. You shut your face, Ikey, see? The guy's name is Ikey.
That's kind of weird, but okay.
Quite right. Scandalous. Ought to be prosecuted. How did they get on the bus? Growled the passengers. So that's several passengers.
Stupid.
A fat, clean-shaven man who sat on the seat in front of me leaned back and addressed me in a cultured voice. Excuse me, he said, but I couldn't help but overhearing parts of your conversation. It was astonishing how these primitive superstitions linger on. I beg your pardon. Oh, God bless my soul. That's all it is. There's not a shred of evidence that this twilight is ever going to turn into night. There has been a revolution of opinion on that in the educated circles. I'm surprised that you haven't heard of it. All of the nightmare fantasies of our ancestors are being swept away. What we now see in this subdued and delicate half-light is the promise of the dawn. The show turning on a whole nation toward the light.
I have a question.
Slow and imperceptible,
I
of
have a
course.
question.
What?
Okay, so are these people taking on different types of religion?
No, if you think about it, religion has not been mentioned so far.
No,
in terms
because
of
some people think it's light, but then other people says it's like not gonna be light.
Well, he's saying that this is coming from the educated circles. So these are people who would be more like scientists as opposed to, theologists or philosophers, even. Or maybe it is philosophy. I don't know. But it's actually, remember, it's an allegory. So darkness is, one way of looking at darkness is,
Evil.
it's evil, but it's also the opposite of understanding. If something is dark, it's you have no understanding. And an analogy, you might be like that Napoleon out in his house, who basically, it sounds like he's somehow cursed to keep repeating all of his mistakes for the rest of his life. So he's definitely in darkness, all that way out there by himself. And then the light, yeah, in addition to goodness, also it indicates knowledge and enlightenment.
Ah.
Yeah, and then also there's anthropology. You know what anthropology is?
No.
It's the study of man, and it
What
looks
about women?
at man and women, the human.
What about animals?
Yeah, the human beings, and so it looks at how we interact with the world, and how we used to interact with the world, and the things that have, and what they found is that throughout the ages, it's technologies that have made major changes in how we socialize. That's another field called sociology, which looks at how people
Basically
come together in
yeah.
groups and cooperate. It always goes down to the family limit. The family unit, that was a sort of an offshoot of that or whatever. It started with tribalism. It started with tribalism.
So basically a family unit.
Well, if you think about the family unit, it's kind of like the smallest
I was trying to
part.
make a joke, but you interrupted.
All right, well, make it quick.
So basically, like a unit, you just need a charger, right?
Yeah.
You just need a charger for that family unit. See, I got a little bit of a laugh out of you.
But what they say is that the invention of fire and basically taming fire and all that, and eventually oil lamps and stuff like that, and eventually electricity, where they had lights that would actually illuminate the nighttime. So up until that time, people feared the night.
Oh.
Yeah, so it is like something that's down in our core.
Candles.
Right. So people, they didn't go out at night. They huddled in caves and huddled in their homes and stuff like that. So it's also there. It is a legitimate primal fear that people
we still
have.
We still are very feared of the night.
Yeah, but it's another way to look at it allegorically in this context is also about the afterlife, right? Because it's talking about what's going to happen next. You're already in hell. They haven't really called it yet, but you're already there.
Yeah.
So, and people, it's kind of like that TV show I mentioned to you, where the guy was in a waiting room.
Yeah.
So that's part of
also kind of like
part of the misery, right, of not knowing what's going to happen next, and
also kind of like Beetlejuice, if that makes sense.
I can.
Where they're in the.
Oh right, yeah, they're trapped.
Groove of hell.
You're right, they're trapped.
There.
Yes, that's good. You're right, Beetlejuice. Now, who would have thought we would have brought Beetlejuice into this?
You just said it 3 times.
Not together. I think you have to say them together, don't you?
Maybe.
Promise of Dawn. Let's see. When daylight comes in the light. Wait a minute. He's doing. And not through eastern windows only. When daylight comes in the light, and that passion for the quote real commodities, which our friends speak of, is only materialism. You know what materialism is.
Basically, where you only care about your stuff.
Yeah, your stuff.
Or your money.
It's all about your stuff.
Your stuff.
It's retrogressive, which means backward. Earthbound, going back toward Earth. Yeah, because they're already in another realm, right? A hankering for matter. You know what matter is? That's a scientific term that refers to anything with mass. Yes. And soon you're going to find out. That's the neat part of this book. He's actually going to explain the difference between what you can have in the town and what you can have in where they're going. But we look on this spiritual city, for with all its faults, it is spiritual, as a nursery in which the creative functions of man, now freed from the clogs of matter, begin to try their wings. A sublime thought, he said. In other words, something we should reflect on. Hours later, there came a change. It began to grow light in the bus. The grayness outside the windows.
This kind of reminds me of like Magic School Bus.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Why did he shoot? Why isn't it a train like to Hogwarts? So like past Hogwarts.
I can just see. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's my thing. We're cruising down hell, yeah. Cruising down, yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember that.
I kind of do.
Okay. All right, well, we'll try and re-record that for the audience before we're done here. We'll have to go YouTube that first.
Do you want me to
no, we're not.
Okay.
Change from a mud color to a mother of pearl, and then to faintest blue, then to a bright blueness that stung the eyes. We seemed to be floating in a pure vacancy, like in the middle of the air. There was no lands, no sun, and no stars in sight.
Darkness.
Only the radiant abyss. I let down the window beside me. Delicious freshness came in for a second, and then, "What the hell are you doing?" Shouted the intelligent man, leaning roughly across me and pulling the window shut.
That's not the fat man.
You're right. I'm sorry. "What the hell are you doing?" shouted the intelligent man, leaning roughly across me and pulling the window sharply down, up.
Down, up and down.
Want us all to, well, I would say normally you would shut the window, but since it's in a bus, I guess you have to put it up.
Yeah.
Want us all to catch our death of cold?
It was getting stuffy.
"Hit him a biff," said the big man. I got that right. I glanced around the bus.
You can tell it by your weight.
Though the windows were closed and soon muffled, the bus was full of light. It was cruel light. It shrank from the faces and forms for which I was surrounded. They were all fixed faces, not of possibilities, but impossibilities. Some gaunt.
Well, that's impossible.
They weren't thinking about possibilities like what could come,
but the impossibilities
of what can happen.
Well, that's impossible, but
right.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's what he's talking about.
I'm trying to simply scrape off any jokes that I can today.
Some gaunt. Sometimes you just have. Anyway, I'm sure you'll have your moment. Some gaunt.
From some viewers of mine said that your voice was boring.
There's nothing that you're stuck with me.
Yeah, me and Taylor got your boring voice.
Some gaunt, some bloated, some glaring with idiotic ferocity. Oh, these are all the faces he was looking at the bus. Some drowned beyond recovery in dreams, but all, in one way or another, distorted.
Wait, tell me all of them. Tell me all the faces.
All right, are you ready? All the fixed faces.
Yes.
Shrank from the faces, forms which are surrounded. Not impossibilities, I guess.
Impossible. Okay.
All right. Some gaunt, which means, like gaunt. Some bloated. Yeah. Some glaring with idiotic ferocity. Okay, that's pretty good. Some drowned beyond recovery in dreams, so just like spaced out. Yeah. But all, in one way or another, distorted and faded. Huh. One had a feeling that they might fall to pieces at any moment if the light grew much stronger. then there was a mirror to the end wall of the bus, and I caught sight of my own, and still the light grew. All right, there we go. All right, that does that does it for chapter 2.
Alexa, play. Cruising down Main Street like my remember words, but my gracious scribe, do whatever you want to, 'cause you can't be you. Going crazy.